Welcome to the Growth Whisperers Podcast, where everything we talk about is building enduring great companies. Not good companies, not okay companies, but amazing, enduring companies. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm here today, as always, with my co-host, Brad. Brad, how you doing today?
Very good, actually. My gosh, it has been the wettest winter, I think, ever, or maybe bar 1 year. It's very, very wet. Looking forward to now beginning to get closer towards spring. How are you doing?
Awesome. Actually, we had rain here for the first time in over a month today. It was our last couple of days. It was kind of wild. Yeah, I'm doing great. Really good. Looking forward to the show today. And what are we digging into today?
Well, today we're talking about SMART goals, how to use SMART goals with your team, why they matter, and why you and I are so picky about them, why we are so annoyingly picky and dig right into them with the teams that we work with, why we make sure that they're always smart. But let's begin with, yes.
Yeah, it seems to be forever. It's one of these things that we work on and continue to work on because it's very hard to stay smart when it comes to goals. We'll dig into that.
Let's start.
So you were about to talk about the word of the day, Brad.
Oh, I was indeed.
Okay, let's hear it. What's the word, the phrase, the sentiment of the day?
That's what we advocate people do. So mine is performance. Now, why? Because we have just finished the Olympic Games. Who ever thought that the 2020 Olympics would be done? But yeah, performance. We've seen performance. I know Australia has done quite well, only because it's my country. But there's a big focus on performance for myself.
Awesome.
And it's I guess it's a global arena that highlights where people focus on performance. What's yours, Kevin?
Yeah, well, by the way, I think Canada did pretty well in the games too.
Sure, they did.
I think we did quite well. The best that we've done in a while, I think. I haven't been up on it the last few days. My word of the day is normalcy. So I was on an airplane last week and went to take an actual trip to another place on an airplane, in airports and hotels and tourist attractions and all that kind of stuff. And then even today, back into a sports car group, and we had a little mini car rally today with a bunch of people. And it was great to be back and a whole bunch of things with humans. So a little bit of normalcy, hoping it stays that way.
Awesome.
Smart.
Yeah, I think
ahead,
just quickly, I think that Canada got 7 gold medals and 24 medals overall. So that's quite a good outcome.
And what did Australia get, Brad?
17 gold and 46 medals overall. So
holy crow!
Yeah.
And we have similar populations.
Yeah,
i.e. similar. So that's.
Oh, I didn't mean to bring that up. Sorry about that.
That's good. I set myself up there, and you went and dug out the facts, Brad. So SMART goals we're talking about today, and it's something that it shocks me how unsmart people are when it comes to goals. It's mind-blowing, actually, and incredibly smart, educated, experienced executives and leaders come up with these mushy, squishy, unsmart goals all the time. And even when they understand it, there's something about human nature that gets in the way, and it's something that we basically end up putting a lot of energy into. We have some tools to help to do it. So it's a real challenge for a lot of companies and teams. So to start with, when we talk about what is a SMART goal? SMART. What is it?
Well, a SMART goal, it's an acronym. But what it does, and we'll dig into what the acronym stands for in a moment, but what it does is it helps you to set a target or a goal that is, I guess, that is more specific than otherwise. An example might be, so we're going to sell more stuff. You and I have both been in many, many meetings where many people put down goals or priorities that are not specific, that are very generic. So we need to increase sales. And the obvious comeback is, well, how much and by when?
Yeah.
And then they the person who's making this statement kind of looks and thinks, well, I haven't really thought about that, but we definitely need to increase sales. So SMART goals help us to be very clear about what it is that we're trying to achieve, so that in the progress of the 13-week race or the year over the time period, that A, we can measure it, and B, we know when we've crossed the finish line.
Yeah, it just makes it real clear what it is. And it's shocking how a lot of times people think in generic terms, and they have good intentions. One that I've seen in people's personal life is I want to get healthier. Well, isn't that nice? Or does it mean, okay, well, I'm going to work out more. Okay. And you keep asking, so what does that mean? What does that mean? What is that? So okay, I want to work out 3 times a week. Okay. What kind of workout are you going to do? And I've got one of my team members, and Tim, he's got his goal. His goal's around sweating. I think he wants to sweat 3 times a week, not workout, but sweating 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes, because it takes into account a whole bunch of things. It means your body's working really, really hard. That's a certain type of workout. Go ahead, Brad.
Or it's summer.
Or it's summer, yes. Or he went somewhere really hot, or he just came out of the sauna.
But I get the point.
It is, and whether it's an activity goal, about that, or it's a goal someone has around blood pressure or weight or who knows what, it's just getting really tangible. And the more tangible, the easier it is to know what it is you need to focus on. Number one. Number two, it's easier from a management perspective to hold people accountable, or to hold yourself accountable when you get down to really something tangible.
Yeah. So SMART goals or SMART priorities are really, I guess we would talk about it in the context of priorities, because KPIs are almost by their very nature SMART. So if I was a salesperson, okay, I would probably have a sales budget. In other words, I need to sell 100 units. And that 100 units, inherent in that would be a time period per month or per week or per year. So in a way, it's a little bit like the KPIs, or working in the business. They're kind of in their very nature set oftentimes in a smart way. But the priorities to work on the business, that's what we're really digging. That's where we need to be smart.
And said differently, KPIs or performance indicators or metrics, whatever you want to call them, they are numbers by nature.
Yeah.
Where goals generally are more likely to be projects. Yeah. So numbers by nature are measurable, and they can be a bit messy, but goals or projects need a little bit of help. By nature, they're good intents, but they're conceptual rather than tangible. So Brad, I know you did a little research on the history of SMART goals. You want to share that, and then we can dig into what they are and some examples.
Yeah. So where did SMART goals come from? They were developed by a chap called George Doran, Arthur Miller, and James Cunningham. In a 1981 article, there's a SMART way to write management goals and objectives. So it's very closely linked with Peter Drucker's management by objectives. Yes. So he refers to the SMART goals as well. And it very much comes from that very popular school of thought. And so then I've heard before that there are about 81 different ways to write the acronym SMART. You could start with specific, or you could use targeted or time-based. So these are the ones that in my humble opinion are most popular, but really there are some similarities. So let's just quickly go through them if you like.
And before you do,
yes.
You mentioned Drucker's management by objective.
Yeah.
And when we look at leaderships, leaders or CEOs or execs, that is the one gap a lot of them have with their people, because their people are hard to manage, they'll say, or they drive them crazy. Yeah. And time again, what do? we start and set objectives, because at the end of the day, how I feel about Fred on my team is interesting. But how did Fred produce versus his goals? And how did he do on his operational metrics? And when you start managing by objective, it takes a lot of the emotion out of it, starts to put a little bit more facts behind it. And at the end of the day, it makes a more constructive conversation with someone like Fred, or easier to have conversation because it's about things happening or not happening versus maybe how you feel. And you might not even be justified to have a conversation about how you feel. But when it's around an objective, it's a thing that's supposed to happen. It's less personal. It makes it a lot easier to lead and manage people, and for them to know their marching orders too.
Yeah, it introduces a third element to the relationship. I like you, Kevin, but you're only doing 50% of the stuff that you're supposed to do to retain your position. And that's a problem that we got to work through. And so that's a very different conversation to only it being the two of us. And I don't think that you're doing the right thing in that sense. It introduces that important third element. So let's perhaps go through them, shall we?
Let's do it.
Specific is number one. S for smart, specific. So these priorities need to be specific and narrow for more effective planning. So we can't be wide.
Yeah, it needs to be very pointed at something. And often they will have words in there like all or every or things like that, which are danger words. To improve all things or everything is almost statistically impossible in a lot of cases. So it's specific, narrowing down on something.
One example is software project. So in a person's priorities, they might write the new Salesforce project, and that's it. And it's that may be way too wide or way too big relative to the time frame of 90 days.
Yep, exactly. Second one's measurable, and basically define the evidence that will prove you're making progress and have completed the goal. This is the one that I am a big stickler about. It's what's the number? And I always say, what number can we put in here that would make an accountant happy? Because then they can know for sure if it's happening or not happening. It's not just story, it's a statistic. This is critical. So it's, sweat by working out and at the gym 3 times a week for at least 45 minutes, as an example of exercise. Sales, it would be, a measurable would be to sign contracts with 4 new clients to a value of a minimum of $2 million per contract, right? And there's the dollar value in there. There's also whether it was signed contract or an invoiced contract, all these little details that really help you to get it measurable.
And very simple. The simple thing that I say is, how do you know when you've crossed the finish line, using a metaphor of a race? Because if we don't know, we don't know. We can look at the gold medal tally and know exactly where every country rates. And so the simple, quick and dirty that I use with teams is I say, so does your priority have a number or a percentage on it? Is it measurable? Because if it doesn't, well, let's put it, and I would be as picky as to say, rather than finish the project, 100% complete is what I would encourage them to rate it with.
And I will add in things sometimes like presented to the board or approved by the board, or presented to the executive team or approved by the executive team. The fact that you wrote your report is interesting. Did it get approved? Because maybe the approval is good, or presented to the board and funding secured. Right? Like whatever the final line you want to cross, this measurable piece. And I find generally there often needs to be 2 or 3 or 4 specific tangible things in it. It's like, I'm going to get the gray, whatever it happens to be, to weigh under 72 grams and maintain the quality of at least X, whatever it happens to be. You generally need to add quite a few clarifying things, because also what happens is 3 months or a year later, you sit back and look at it and you forget what it was.
Yeah.
Like I've learned, for example, after doing this so many times, when it comes to revenue, invoiced versus signed are two very different things. The contract signed versus the invoice sent to a client. Those are dramatic. In some businesses, that can be a lag time of an hour, or it can be a lag time of 2 years.
Yeah.
Depending on, so that detail there when you're talking about sales. The other piece is all sales aren't created equal. We're going to, sign those clients for $2 million each. Okay. At what margin? Because not all sales are created equal. So anyways, there's all kinds of other things. We can get into lots of details, but being really specific about being measurable.
And the last thing about measurable is that you can track its progress through the period. So if you need to sell 130 widgets in the next quarter of 13 weeks, that means that you're going to have 10 widgets per week on average being sold. So at the weekly meeting, you can report to the team on the progress. If it's not measurable, what do you talk about at the weekly meeting? There's, I don't know.
It becomes an opinion fest. Oh yeah, it's going great.
Yeah,
it's going awesome. And the last thing I'll say, measurable. We gotta move along. We're trying to do a little quicker episode here today. Is the other thing on measurable? Oh, it just slipped out of my brain. It was really good, Brad. It was one of those things. It was measuring. It'll come back. The key is being crystal clear, and making it easier for people to know what great looks like, so they can help themselves and their teams to lead towards great.
Oh my God, I'm so excited about the next one, achievable. Oh my God, it is achievable.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a new electric car with no experience in the next 13 weeks. And it's going to be awesome.
Oh yeah.
And everyone gets super excited about that. And they're high-fiving, they're pumping each other on the back of the back. And then we get 10 weeks in that we're going, you know what? Like, maybe we set the bar a little bit too high.
Yeah, we didn't even get government approval to test one, never mind build one, or whatever. And so this is a part of the achievable. Sometimes we work on action plans in our meetings where we'll build a 10, 20, 30 point action plan. And you'll notice things that are time sensitive or dependencies. And it also helps you to lock down the achievability, because you realize some things just aren't possible. But the achievable one is big, because that's why we have things where people will say all and every. Yeah, we're going to fully implement the ERP system this quarter. Like hell you are. What specifically will you absolutely get done will be this, because ERPs take a couple of years to implement normally, because there's a whole, but it's, is that possible? Or, we're going to land 4 new clients at $2 million a piece. Great. How many did we land in the last year?
Yeah.
None. Okay. Or we're going to do it a gross margin of 48%. Okay. What's our gross margin now? 32. Well, no, that's not possible. Like, there's a build, even if it could be possible, is it realistic? And, where people, when I was younger and a lot of youthful exuberance, we often would set stretch goals and really push ourselves too hard. But that sets up, as organizations get larger, for a lot of failure. So it's good to stretch, but is it actually seriously achievable? And sometimes you're best to talk to some people on your team to really get a reality check on it. We also have in meetings a cooling off period of 48 hours, because sometimes people get excited and overcommit in a meeting because they feel pressure or just enthusiasm, and then they get a reality check. So within 48 hours, you can come back and make a change, and we like to give people time so we don't overcommit, because you're going to be held accountable.
Yeah, I do a very similar thing. I would say you've got between now and the first weekly meeting to stress test your ideas, to make sure, look, we're going to go for 100. We're actually going to go for 80 because I learned a little bit of stuff to tighten up that stuff. But let's say it's within the ballpark at the end of a planning session. And I guess the only other thing about achievable is people will sometimes say when they have failed at the end of a quarter about the previous quarter, yeah, look, I just didn't I just didn't realize I had as much time as I did. Like I thought I had more time to devote to this, and my team took all this time away. So it's got to be achievable within the time period.
Right.
And give yourself a bit of grace in the early days, because you get to better appreciate this the more that you're
it's a great
in the
point,
planning
Brad.
session.
There's achievable based on the forces of nature and resources. And then there's achievable in your schedule.
Yeah.
And and when people are taking vacations or other things that are going on. So it's achievable and concerning everything in the environment. All right. So we got specific, measurable, achievable. Now we'll go to the R in SMART, which is relevant. Basically, do they matter? Like, does it relate to your long-term goals? Does it fit with your values and your culture and what you're about? If you have a big, we were at an event today, and we were doing an environmental tour, and we went through a bog called Burns Bog near where we live, and learning how bogs are created, which is like a wetland. And I learned a lot of stuff about wetlands today. It was quite fascinating, this event. But the long story short is, as someone was saying, here we are driving around in sports cars, which is the other spectrum of the environmental world. And then this beautiful woman was walking us through and teaching us all about wetlands and rehabilitating wetlands and how it's good for the world and the environment. And we're driving gas guzzling cars. And it's sort of saying that's, in many ways, it's almost kind of funny. It's almost like a values conflict, and I care about the environment and stuff, but it's almost like if you're, if you're a real strong environmental company, buying or setting up something to start burning fossil fuels, may not fit. It's not relevant, even though it could be a good business idea. It may not be relevant for your culture. It could be a conflict with what you're about as a company. And then there's ones where goals people get excited about it and have pet projects, but they actually don't fit into the strategy.
Yeah.
And that's why we have our top 3 or 5 priorities for a 3-year time horizon and a 1 year and a quarter. But it better darn well fit into what we want to make happen in the next 3 years. Otherwise, it may not even though it's your pet project, it may not be relevant enough to even be on the list.
Yeah. I met with a CEO recently, and she was saying how her biggest problem is that she had these 8 areas of opportunity, and she was overwhelmed because she didn't know where to focus, which is kind of relevant. Okay. And so what we did then is we focused in and discussed the hedgehog. We discussed what we've spoken about the hedgehog on this podcast from Jim Collins before. We discussed the hedgehog, how it works, and she pretty much eliminated about 4 or 5 of them to focus on the things that really matter. So when building your SMART priorities, they've got to be relevant to your overall company values and goals and long-term objectives.
Yep. Maybe not just you or someone's pet project. Okay. And then finally, the T in SMART is time-based, just a realistic time. Now, normally in the methods that we use, most goals have a quarterly rhythm, and it makes it simpler. So most of our priorities, it's based on the 90-day rhythm. And for our firm and lots of our clients run on a calendar year. So this quarter that we're in is July, August, September, which means at this point we have about 2 months left, a little less than 2 months left. And by default, it's by the end of September is the starting point. Now, we might sequence some and have them at different times, but a clear deadline of when you are going to aim to have it complete. And it helps. That's why we do quarterly goals, is you've got, everyone crams for the exam, leaves their homework till the end. But really at the end of it, it's we do quarterly because you have 4 times a year you cram for the exam. You might do some monthly goals or even weekly goals to help, move progress more often. But the point is a deadline to help you stay focused so you can be creative about getting it done more quickly rather than letting it drag.
And maybe it relates to other people's priorities as well. Maybe someone else has a goal or a priority for the quarter that's relying on what you're doing. So you've got to liaise with them to make sure, okay, so I'll get it done by week 4 so that you can get yours done by week 12 or whatever it is. But it absolutely must have a date on a priority. It must have a number and a percentage and a date. If it doesn't, then that's the question you've got to ask.
Yeah, and so that's sure another. We both might have another example. We'll wrap this one up, but specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. I just had a flash of a meeting I was in, and in one of the companies that we work with, we review company level goals and department goals. Right, there's like 7 or 8 key departments, and we review those every quarter. We set them every quarter and review them. And I remember being in a meeting when I was, probably like 18 months ago. And as we went through this, we saw and reviewed the department goals. And one of the department, their goals weren't SMART. And everyone's going through, and you can feel the tension in the room. People are like, you're saying you're 87% complete. Like, yeah, I'm not buying it, but I can't challenge you because there's nothing there to challenge against. It was their opinion that they were 87% complete. There was no way to have an intelligent conversation. And I believe they worked hard, and I believe they did some good work. But the goal was mush. And it was very, very hard to do anything constructive with it for them or for us, because the measuring stick was non-existent.
Yeah, it's like, go back to the Olympics. Imagine being at the Olympics when there was no definition of when you crossed the finish line.
Yes.
Like, you absolutely need that. And you need the time to know how the people are performing.
Yep.
So awesome. What a good chat around SMART goals today. And a quick note, our next 2 episodes are going to be about how the best leaders hold people accountable. So how to create a culture of accountability. So do look forward to those ones. So
yes,
let's do a super quick summary here. Often the problem is that goals aren't SMART. Goals or priorities, they don't clearly state what needs to be achieved. That leads to poor execution. So they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. Kevin, would you like to close this out, please?
Yeah, and it's a very smart thing to have SMART goals. And the truth is, it makes your life and their life, isn't that cheesy? That's not awesome. But it makes your life and their life better, because it's crystal clear what greatness looks like in their world and what they must achieve. And it's crystal clear for you as a manager, because you can have conversations. How are you doing on the 5 things that you said were so important? And because it's mathematical, the measurements, you don't have to have an opinion fest, and you have a lot less tension. So it basically, in many ways, it's like having lines on the highway and speed signs on the highway. Everyone knows what to expect, and it makes it a heck of a lot easier. So be smart. Help your people be smart. That's kind of what we're here to help you with. And if you're already doing it, congrats. And if you need a tune up, just tighten it up. So that's it. You want to wrap us up there, Brad?
Okay. Thank you for your time today. We hope that you've gotten value about SMART goals. As always, this is the Growth Whisperers, and I'm Brad Giles. You can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au. Kevin, you can find at lawrenceandco.com. And of course, if you are so interested, this is on not only podcasts, but also on YouTube. So do have a good week, and we look forward to chatting to you again next week. Take care.